Good morning and welcome back to the Where Does It Come From podcast. I'm your host, Jo Salter, and today I have the wonderful Jason Alexander with me, aka Wildlife Gadget Man, aka Rubbish Walks. So we have Jason with us, and he's going to be telling us quite a lot about the things he's doing with rubbish. Basically, we're going to be talking rubbish. So Jason, first of all, please could you tell me a bit about yourself and what prompted you to start collecting rubbish?
Well, hi, Joe. Thanks for inviting me along. It started quite a few years ago, to be honest. My background is in electronics and product design, and many years ago, back in 2004, something like that, I designed a range of wildlife camera systems. So the kind of thing that you see on Springwatch, I think many of us have enjoyed watching an episode or two of Springwatch, and I can distinctly remember the first time I watched it. I'd actually just had quite a nasty sporting accident. I snapped my Achilles tendon. And we'd literally just gone self-employed. I started a property maintenance business with my brother, and 3 months in, snapped my Achilles tendon. So there wasn't really much I could do apart from kind of sit on the sofa with my leg up in plaster and ponder, what I was going to be doing for the next 12 to 16 weeks. And my son at the time was 4. And absolutely mad about wildlife. And I can remember watching Bill Oddie chatting about the little tiny blue tits inside this nest box, and the whole nation was enthralled by the story developing of, will the eggs hatch, will the chicks fledge? And I can remember thinking that would be an absolutely brilliant present for Sam, my son, for birthday or Christmas. And I had lots of time to do research. So I was looking in magazines and on the internet, and there was only 1 or 2 nest box cameras available at the time, and they were either really expensive or not very good. And that was kind of one of the first ever kind of genuine light bulb moments that I've ever had, where I thought, well, hang on a sec, I have a background in electronics and product design. My brother, who I set up the property maintenance business with, is a fantastic carpenter. And I thought, well, maybe there's something here. I can design some camera systems. And it snowballed from there. And within three to 4 years, we've become the biggest manufacturers, or the largest manufacturers in Europe of that kind of equipment, which sounds more impressive than it is, because it's it sounds more impressive than it is because it's quite a niche market, but something that we were really proud of, and we were lucky enough to win a number of different awards, which Best Buy magazine and that kind of thing. And the BBC started to use some of the kits as well, and 1 or 2 of the camera kits were used in the Springwatch series. And I was lucky enough to visit some of the locations and became friendly with one of the original presenters, Simon King. And Simon was the one who was always going off up to Shetland and stalking the deer, and he'd always have his cap on, and he'd quite often the seagulls would fly over and leave a little present on the top of his hat. And so we became quite friendly, and Simon started using some of my kits as well, and eventually Simon left the BBC and Springwatch and became my business partner for a while.
Oh, brilliant.
And we started something called Wildlife Whisperer. And of course I'm thinking, I've now got an Emmy award winning world-renowned wildlife photographer and author as a business partner. What could possibly go wrong? And quite a bit, as it turns out. And
life's curveballs.
And Simon and I, great friends, got on really well, but we're kind of from different worlds. So Simon's out doing all the wonderful filming and creating wonderful films, and I was stuck in the office running the business, chatting to everyone else about all of their wonderful wildlife adventures, whilst I'm trying to keep everything going in the background. And to be honest, I got quite fed up with it quite quickly. And I had the opportunity to sell my share in the business and get back to doing something that I love doing, which is tinkering with gadgets, getting closer to wildlife and interacting with people. So I set up something called Wildlife Gadget Man and absolutely loved it. And back in what must be around about 2014 now, I set myself a challenge to witness and photograph 100 sunrises in a year. And that's a lot harder than it sounds. You have to get up for a lot more than 100 sunrises to witness them. And it was much a kind of health and well-being thing as taking the photographs. So it was about balancing being in the moment with sharing the moment, and that's something that I try and do throughout my life. But what I found is I'm lucky living here in Suffolk. We've got some wonderful, beautiful locations. We're on the East Coast, so we have wonderful sunrises over the sea. And so I was getting up really early, experiencing some wonderful, wonderful sunrises and taking some lovely photos. But what I found is that I was starting to move pieces of litter and rubbish out of the way to make the scenes look as amazing as they could be. And I was always brought up, as I'm sure you were, that we pop our litter, any trash that we've got, in the bin. So as I'm moving these crisp packets and coffee cups out of the way, I couldn't just leave it there. So I'd pick it up, take it to the nearest bin, or take it home and stick it in the recycling bin if I could. And that soon became an integral part of my daily routine. And whereas before, if I was getting up in the summer at silly o'clock, it might be 3 a.m. or 3:30, and I'd look out of the window and see that it was a little bit cloudy, overcast, drizzly, I might have thought, well, actually I'll go back to bed for 2 or 3 hours. I suddenly found myself thinking, well, actually I could still go out and do a beach clean or a litter pick. And that worked quite well in the early stages because it was a few years ago, so it was kind of less mainstream than it is now. It's not exactly mainstream now, but it was we were kind of in the minority, the kind of the weirdo with their litter picker and bag walking along picking up other people's trash. You get some funny looks. So what I found was, when I first started to do it, I found myself choosing maybe times of the day when I thought there would be less people around, or locations where I thought there would be less people around, because I suppose I felt a little bit, there was an element of embarrassment or awkwardness about doing what I was doing. But I very, very quickly got over that. And the more that I looked into the issues of littering and the impact that we're having on the environment, I soon got over any embarrassment and thought, well, actually, I'm looking at this totally the wrong way. I need to flip it on its head, and I need to be going out when there are lots of people around, not because I want people to see me and think, oh, look at that fella, he's doing a good job. It was a case of being there, being visible, and just prompting people to start maybe thinking about their actions. So and I'm sure we'll talk about this more as we go on, but I'm not a confrontational person. I think nobody likes to be told what to do. It's all about trying to nudge people in the right direction, and eventually we'll start to make a difference. We'll start to head in the right direction, and we'll start to see proper, effective long-term change.
Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what led me on to create rubbish walks. So the sunrise, the 100 sunrise challenge was fantastic, but obviously once I'd finished that, I had a new mission, and I spent a lot less time doing all of my wildlife Gadget Man stuff, and a lot more time finding out more about our impact in the environment, the different things that we do in our everyday lives that have an impact, and then trying to think of ways of sharing the information that I'm finding with as many people as I can. Mm-hmm. Again, without being too preachy, without making it complicated, and it's about sharing my failures that I have along the way, as well as all the good things, because particularly when we look at social media, we see all of the amazing stuff that people are doing, and most of the time it doesn't represent the real world at all. So I think it's important to try and share a balanced view and a balanced a balanced story of, you know, there are ups, there are downs, there are positives, there are negatives, and as many of the people you've already spoken to have said, that Jen, I think in the last last podcast, you know, none of us are perfect. No. You know, and we shouldn't expect anyone else to be perfect either. And I think what we need is we need as many people as we can doing some of this stuff imperfectly, rather than just a few doing it perfectly. Definitely. And the more we can do that, the better we'll be.
That's funny you said that. That really resonated when you were speaking. I was thinking that just what Jen said last time. It's very interesting.
Yeah, well, I obviously I managed to catch the podcast with Jen. Absolutely fantastic, and I managed awesome. One with Sean as well, about greenwashing, and both of the messages from both of those podcasts really resonated with me, and it showed me that a lot of we're all working together with the same issue, trying to address the same issues. Mm-hmm. The key thing is, for me, I think, is that what we've got to be careful of is, as these issues become more mainstream in the media, the general public are going to start to potentially get bored of it. They're going to become blind to the issues. Oh, yeah, I've heard all that before. I've heard those issues. I've heard those stats. You get a little bit more bored, and you move on to the next thing. And all of what we're trying to achieve, generally speaking, that our goals don't change from 1 year to the next. We want people to use less stuff. We want to recycle better. We want to use less plastic, all of those kind of things. But we're not going to be able to make those changes overnight. It's something that's going to take us. It's taken us a few generations to get into the pickle that we're in, and it's going to take us a few generations to get out of it. So what I'm work hard to try to do is to find new and interesting ways of sharing that same message over and over again, to try and keep it fresh in people's minds. So you're keeping it fresh for the people who already follow you, who you already engage with, but you also potentially manage to grab the attention of people that maybe you haven't spoken to before, or they haven't seen any of the things that you share on social media.
Oh, and on your website, I love your goals, actually, your 3 goals, which change attitudes, which is just what you're saying, build communities, which I think was an interesting one, and kick butts.
Yeah, so with those, so changing attitudes, yeah. So that's one of the key things. You know, we've just got to. The way I try and look at it is that, as I say, none of us are perfect. We can't expect ourselves to be perfect, but if we can do a little more than we done yesterday, we're heading in the right direction.
Absolutely.
And when it comes to communities, it's much easier to do that with others than it is just by yourself. And when we think of communities, we can think of that in a number of different ways, whether it's with our kind of immediate family and friends, whether it could be neighbors, at work, at school. We can think of it in any number of different ways. And the more that we can kind of join all those up together, the better, and we can build these bigger movements. And the kicking butt aspect kind of links into one of my kind of key passions and areas that I try and tackle, and that's the issue of cigarette butts and cigarette butt litter. Or that can be a tricky conversation, because as soon as you start, you mention the issue of smoking in general comes up, and whether people should smoke or not. And the problem is, people are so passionate about the subject, as they are with many other subjects, but particularly with smoking, where you inevitably get people coming into the conversation that says, well, we should be banning smoking, full stop, we shouldn't be smoking anyway. And I always try and avoid that conversation. I never say to anyone that you should or shouldn't smoke. The choice is yours. You're not breaking any laws by choosing to smoke. My issue is with the issue of littering. The problem of littering. So as soon as you drop that cigarette butt on the ground, rather than disposing of it properly in a bin somewhere, you then committed a littering offence.
And I think one of your campaigns was talking about there's actually plastic in cigarette butts.
So one of the things that lots of people aren't aware of is that cigarette butts are actually made of a form of plastic called cellulose acetate, and it's a very similar kind of plastic that's used to make sunglass frames, that kind of thing. So cigarette butts are the most common form of plastic pollution on the planet, and it's estimated. I don't usually quote lots of facts and figures, because I think at the end of the day, nobody really remembers them, and you can look in so many different sources and the numbers change. But it's estimated that there are more than 4 trillion cigarette butts dropped in the environment every single year, and that's a conservative estimate. 4.5 trillion. That's a really hard number to get your head around. And when you think that's more than way more than all of the stars in our galaxy.
Oh my goodness.
And if you think, if you were to lay all the cigarette butts dropped in 1 year, end to end, it would stretch to the moon and back more than 100 times. That's in a single year. And it's also suggested that cigarette butts can take between 18 months and 10 years to break up in the environment. Obviously, the different, depending on where they are, they'll hang around for varying amounts of time. But if you think 4.5 trillion every single year, and they could be hanging around for up to 10 years, that's a lot of plastic in the environment. And as with lots and lots of plastic, it never really truly disappears in the environment. We hear about plastics breaking down in the environment, when really we should be thinking of it as breaking up into smaller and smaller pieces. And it's those small pieces that really are the real concern, because when we get to microplastics and nanoplastics, it then finds its way into the food chain, and once it gets into the lower levels of the food chain, it's everywhere. It's in us, and it's a real worry, because at the end of the day, we really don't know what the long-term impact is.
No,
we have there's research going on all the time. We have an idea of the issues, but we're still learning every day. And I think one of the key things that really interests me is, even when we have all of this information, so whether we think about cigarette butts and smoking, even though we know the impact that smoking has on our health, people still choose to smoke. Even when we know the impact that plastic has on the environment, whether it's in the oceans or on the land, we're still choosing to use it. And even when we think about the pandemic, what we've just gone through, even when we have all of the information that's available and we can see with our own eyes what's going on, we still have people who believe that it's not real. We still have people who think that I'm not going to wear a mask. You can't tell me what to do. They don't believe in vaccines, all of those kind of things. And we're seeing exactly the same attitudes as we get with littering. So you can't tell me to put my litter in a bin. Who are you to tell me to use a reusable water bottle rather than just buy one off the shelf? That kind of thing. And so even when we have a kind of a worldwide pandemic, we can't persuade people to make positive, meaningful change. We could ask ourselves, well, what hope have we got by trying to encourage someone to put a crisp packet in a bin?
Well, I think it's something to do. I mean, Jen and I, as you would have heard, we were talking about being on a journey, and I firmly believe that everybody's in a different place in that journey, and it's just catching them at the right time, isn't it? It's the same with the climate emergency. People don't accept necessarily, a lot of people don't accept there is an emergency despite all the evidence, despite all the facts, but you still got to try and find some way of catching them on their own terms, finding something that speaks to them, don't you?
Exactly. I remember you speaking about bubbles, being in your own bubble, and that's right. We're all coming at the world we've all got a different frame of reference. We've all got different priorities. We all see things in slightly different ways. And you're 100% right. Part of what we need to try and do, whether we're running a business or whether we're trying to raise awareness about a certain issue, is we can't always come up these things from our own frame of reference. We've got to be able to step back and put ourselves in the position of the audience that we're trying to connect with.
Yeah.
So whether it's the consumer and encouraging them to, where do they buy their clothes from, where as with yourself, or if we think about the issue of bottled water, that's another thing that I could talk hours about, what bottled water, but it's stepping back and remembering that just because this is, these kind of issues are something that we're passionate about, and we spend, many of us spend every kind of waking moment thinking about it, and we've spent a number of years thinking about it. For lots of other people, it hasn't been on their radar.
No,
it's not been a priority for them. As I think as Jen said,
Jen was saying,
previously, that they've got to think about the school run, or there's the next meeting at work that you've got to make sure you get there on time for. The car's got to go in for a service, all of those kind of things. And we have all of these other things in our life going on, and for many of us, the last thing we want is for someone to keep banging on about, oh, make sure you put your cigarette butt in the bin properly, make sure you you don't forget to take your reusable water bottle next time you go for a walk, and all those kind of things. And so it's about choosing your battles,
Yes.
and choosing the timing of those battles as well.
And I think as well, it's about making the message palatable. I mean, one thing, you just painted an absolutely beautiful picture with the stars in the sky relating to the butts and things. And you were talking about having a message that people will see on social media that feels new to them, or whatever way they're receiving it. I mean, you've run lots of campaigns, and I've been watching through the years since I've known you, and they've gained national media attention. I know you're very modest about it, but your 1 million butts campaign in particular gained a lot of attention. So how do you keep things fresh? How do you paint those pictures in ways that people don't turn away, but actually say, oh, that looks really interesting, I want to know more, I want to get involved?
Yeah, I think it's one of the key things is I spend a lot of time on social media, but I spend my time on social media because I see it as an integral part of my toolkit to try and get the message across. So it's not part of my life because, oh, I've got to see what the latest trend is in mobile phones, or the latest dance moves, or that kind of thing. It is, although that's interesting, because you can then see what's gaining traction, what people are interested in, and what different areas of the demographics of the public are interested in, to be able to then target your messaging to those particular groups. So, for example, one of the key things, I think, and we'll probably chat about this a little bit later, is education. Is trying to get the message across, and provide information to as many people as we can about these issues, to on many occasions just to get them to start asking questions, and to start to help them start their journey. And that goes for any age group. So I'm particularly passionate about getting into schools and working with school children as much as I can. It's easier with primary school children, but where we start to get it's a little bit more difficult is as the children get older and we get into secondary school, and it becomes less cool to do a number of these things. That's one of the areas that we've got to try and tackle, and I work hard to try and address that. And it's not easy, and I think it's, for a lot of people, there are things that you can do that are easy, that are going to get likes and shares on social media. And if that's what you want to do, great, but in the grand scheme of things, you're not going to change a lot. So what I try and do with a lot of the content that I share is, obviously you want to try and get a little bit of traction, you want to try and get the message to the widest audience possible, but it's about getting that, it's about the message, it's not about the how many likes and shares that it gets, if that makes sense.
I mean, you need to get that traction, because if you've got to have a balance, haven't you, between the message and enough people seeing it. And obviously the more likes and shares you get, the more people are going to see it. But I think you do it in a really fun way. I mean, I was laughing my head off at one you did a week or two ago, where you had yourself dressed up as some kind of monster going through the woods chasing people dropping litter. That was hysterical.
So that's the litter raptor. So that was an idea I had a while ago, and that's one of these kind of part inflatable costumes. So it basically looks like I'm sitting on top of a velociraptor. Great fun. But I thought, and I saw one or two videos online with people just running around, shopping precincts and scaring people and that kind of thing, and people were laughing and taking photos, and it was fun. It made me watch it a few times, and I thought, actually, how can I use an idea like that to get some of this messaging across? So I created a little kind of backpack. Oh, I remember where the connection came. It was also around about that time. There was a video that I saw of a couple of chaps in Japan dressed up as like samurai, and they were picking up litter. So they had baskets on their back, and they had the tongs that they were using rather than litter pickers, and they were picking up the litter with all of the amazing graceful movements of these samurai and ninjas popping the litter into the baskets on their back. Absolutely brilliant. And I kind of made that connection and thought, well, actually, what if I make a little kind of bin to put on my back, and I can run around with my litter picker, sitting on top of this velociraptor, picking up litter as I go. And so the video is just chatting about kind of beware the litteraptors coming to town, and his favorite meal is lazy humans that litter. And but it starts the conversation.
Yes.
Kids love it because it's a bit of fun. Some adults enjoy it, but one of the other things that I've learned is, no matter what you do, you're never going to please everyone. There's always going to be some people that get it, some people that don't get it. And so you concentrate on trying to get the message across to the people who are open to that messaging and who will get it, and don't get hung up on the others that, no matter what you say or do, aren't gonna change.
No, that's so true.
And that's when you're looking at the issues in general, and it goes for in business when you're trying to sell products as well, is that you've got this the kind of bell curve where you've got, at one end you've got your early adopters, who you get something new comes along, they've got to be the first to have it, and they kind of get it, and they'll do kind of whatever you say. And then you've got this next chunk that they're open-minded, but they'll wait to see what these early adopters think of it. And at the other end of the scale, you've got this group, this certain percentage that, no matter what you say, what you do, what products come out, they're not interested. They're not going to be involved. We have this issue when it comes to, or this same scenario when it comes to littering as well. So we've got, when we're trying to get the anti-littering message out there, you've got some people who get it straight away, like you and I, brought up not to litter, and that's great. You've then got, at the other end of the spectrum, you've got people who are, no matter what you say or do, you're not going to tell them what to do, and if they want to throw litter on the ground or out of their car window, they're going to do it. And it's that chunk of the population where proper enforcement comes in, because that's going to be the only way that you're going to manage to deal with that. But then you've got this kind of grey area in the middle, this chunk of the population in the middle, that if you can get the messaging across to them, they're open enough to change their ways, to kind of head towards doing the right thing rather than the other way.
So they're the target market, really, aren't they?
They are, yeah.
I went to an interesting talk a few years ago, pre-pandemic actually, with Lucy Siegel from the Observer, and Christina Figueres, one of the people who negotiated the Paris Climate Agreement. And she was talking about climate deniers. And she was basically saying, I don't worry about them, because there's going to be 5 to 10% of people who deny that the climate emergency is happening. And some of them have their own issues for that. Some of it's because their business or whatever, or their religion, or whatever they want to excuse. I just don't even worry about people like that. I'm never going to change their minds. The people you want to focus on are the people in the middle who just don't know. They're the ones who you give the information to, and you bring them along with you. And that really resonated with me, actually.
Yeah, and that's so true. And the more that we can kind of open people's eyes to the issues, the more chance we've got of bringing people along on that journey. I'm just as we're chatting, another thing sprang to mind about with Sean
Conway.
when you spoke to Sean Conway about greenwashing.
Yeah.
And I think one of the key things that we could do, particularly when it comes to education, is try and share with as many people as we can. And I'd love to see this taught in schools about the tactics that are used in marketing.
Yeah.
So we grow up knowing from an early age what these brands are doing.
Mm-hmm.
We can still choose to buy the stuff or not to buy the stuff, but if we know the kind of tactics that are being used, and we know that they're trying to tug at the heartstrings or try to persuade us that we need that new mobile phone, or our life's not going to be worth living, then if we can help as many people to understand that as we can, as an early age as we can, then we'll grow up with being a little bit more skeptical.
Yeah, definitely.
And asking more questions and asking the right questions. And I think a consequence of that is that we will naturally start to buy less stuff that we don't need, and the stuff that we do buy, we'll ask the right questions and buy the right stuff.
Yep, I think you're so right about questions. I mean, I think that's the main thing, isn't it? I wish education did deal more with getting children to learn to assess facts and ask questions. I know with my children, when they were small, if adverts ever came on, I just used to say, I'm probably a bad mum, I used to say, this is just people trying to get us to buy things we don't want. We don't listen to them. And that was just my approach to it. They're doing it for their benefit, not our benefit. You've always got to think why people are doing things, don't you?
Yeah, I can remember many years ago when I was young, obviously way before the internet. It was catalogs, the
Oh
old mail
yes,
order catalogs,
yeah,
and you would spend hours flicking through to the toy section in
yeah,
the catalogs, and then it was all about the bright colors, the
yeah.
photography, the words that were used, and you'd go to sleep thinking about the Action Man figure that you just had to have. And now obviously with the internet, it's just, we are constantly bombarded with all of this information and visuals, almost every second of every day. And it's sometimes it's hard. What we've got to try and remember is, particularly when we think about the younger children, is that they're growing up in a different world to what we grew up in. But I think we as a generation have a very important role to play, because I think when historians look back at this time, our generation we're either going to be seen as the villains or we're going to be seen as heroes, because we are the generation that grew up before the internet and this explosion of all of this, with fast food and gadgets and all that kind of thing. But we've lived through both ages, so we remember a time before that, and we remember a time living with it, and we need to be able to share those. We can share those experiences firsthand with our children and grandchildren about life before the internet, life before the mobile phone, and all, and a coffee shop or takeaway coffee shop on every corner, and
Yeah.
and
Rubbish.
help them understand that, you know, our lives, our worlds don't have to revolve around technology and stuff.
No, it's true. But it's actually going back to a previous point you made. It's about getting their attention, though, isn't it? So working with schools and groups and young people and everything, but getting their attention, because there's almost like this, everything's competing for attention. Everything on their screens is competing for attention. So to get this message across, which is quite serious, it's about doing that in a really fun way. I mean, I love the way that you lay out all the cigarette butts into numbers, and you make messages out of some of the litter that you have, because that catches the attention, which is, they're scrolling through so many different things. It's making it fun and accessible rather than a chore they have to do.
That's the, I think, one of the key things: making it fun, making it accessible. And as more and more of us try and share this messaging, as we're scrolling through our timelines on social media, there's only so many times you can scroll through an image of a bin bag full of litter.
Yeah.
You know, so and I share images of bin bags of litter, but I try and balance that with other things. And every time I share a post, one of the things that I ask myself before I click publish is, so what? So I've got this message I'm going to share. So what? You know, what do I want the person looking at this to take away from it? And sometimes the answer might be, well, nothing. It is just, you know, that's a lovely scene over there, you know, a beautiful waterfall or something, and I want to share it. But I might add something on there saying, you know, it's great to see that this is litter free. You know, if we want to keep it like that, then we've got to keep the messaging going, you know, about that kind of thing. So it's asking asking the right questions.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, the so what question is really, really important, because I've lost count of how many times I go to share a post, and it's not until I ask that so what question that I think, well, actually, I need to add an extra paragraph here of information that might point someone in a direction of another post, or a web page, or a video, or it or gets them to kind of have a question in their mind. So, you know, if I can get somebody to leave my post as they scroll through social media with a lingering question,
Yeah.
in
You're
the back of their
drawing them in,
mind,
aren't you? You're drawing them in. I mean,
then
I think that whole, one of your goals about build communities, I think that's a really key part. I mean, I saw one the other day, one of your excellent videos, where you were going along in front of a long line of young primary school children. I don't know how old they were, 10, maybe something like that. And they were all doing the conga with their litter bags and all of that. And I thought, to me, that immediately makes me think, you've made this fun, but at the same time, there's an underlying message that you've taught them about the need to litter pick, but you haven't gone, hey, boys and girls, it's really important that you pick up all this litter, you know, and all this kind of thing. You actually said, this is a bit of a game, let's do this together. And everyone who's watching that video will have had a little smile, but the little message would have gone into their head about, this can be fun, I should do this with my kids, you know?
exactly. And I think it's all about trying to leave those lasting impressions. So one of the things that I've been working on through lockdown is developing an idea for a film festival for school children. And the idea is that, without going into too much detail, what I'm hoping to do is we get different schools involved, different subjects, the children create short films, but the ultimate goal is that they get to see their film on the big screen at the cinema. And it's that kind of thing that will stick with them as they grow up, that they remember they saw themselves maybe on the big screen at the cinema.
Mm.
And that's the kind of story that they'll tell their children and
Yeah.
their potentially and their grandchildren. And they'll inevitably say, well, why were you on the big screen? What was the film about? And hopefully we'll keep the conversation going. So that's something that obviously with the pandemic, it makes things a little bit awkward getting people into that kind of thing. And it's not quite the same watching it on the
Zoom.
computer. The key thing with that is, for you to be in the cinema environment, seeing yourself on the big screen. So that kind of idea is, I've got a bit of time to make that happen, but right time at the right place, I think that could work really well.
That would be amazing.
And it's coming up with all of those kind of little ideas that can make a difference. And whether that's children at primary school, whether it's adults, I think one of the things I love about what I do is, with the regular walks and litter picks that we do, is the friendships that you build. And I've met lots of lovely people and made friends through a lot of the walks and beach cleans and litter picks that I've done. And with those walks, I mentioned right at the beginning about the mental health and health and well-being aspect. And for me, it is the events that we do, the litter picks and walks, is as much about the mental health and well-being aspect, because we're still living in a really kind of very strange times, in an uncertain world where many of us feel totally powerless. And one of the things with going for our walks and litter picking or doing a beach clean, it gives us a little bit of power, a little bit of control over something. So we can go for a walk and we can feel like we've had a positive impact in the world on that day. And that might be the only thing that we feel that we've done positive that day. But we don't need to wait for big brands to change their packaging. We don't need to wait for politicians to introduce new legislation to make it more difficult for these brands to use certain materials, or to or for local government to be better at enforcing existing littering laws. All of that kind of thing can be used as excuses. We don't need to wait for that to happen. We have it in our power to make positive changes right now if we want to. And anyone could finish listening to this podcast and they could decide to go out for a walk and pick up some litter and pop it in the bin, and they're having a positive impact. And you might think, well, in the grand scheme of things, what difference is that going to make? Well, individually, maybe not a huge amount, but the more people we can get out there doing it, collectively, it really does start to make a difference. And who knows, if you might go out, pop to the shops after listening to this podcast, or you may be actually listening to this podcast as you're walking along on a walk at the moment. And if you are walking along listening to this podcast, how many pieces of litter have you walked past as you're walking along? Has it occurred to you to actually I'm not going to walk past that litter anymore, I'm going to pick it up and pop it in the nearest bin? And if we can encourage people just to do that, we're having a positive impact. If we're picking up more litter than we're dropping, which is hopefully we're not dropping any litter, but if we pick up more than we drop, we're having a positive impact. And we never know who's looking, who's watching. And it might be that that might be the only time that you pick up some litter and put it in the bin. But you don't know, there can be a small child walking past with their mum or their dad, and they see you doing that, and that might spark a little something in their mind and start them on on a slightly different journey,
Definitely.
just because they saw you doing that. And we never know when that's going to happen.
No. And also
So
going back to mental health, I mean, so it's helping. You've got your superpower to help change the world, but you're going to feel better when you do that because you've made a difference. And also just being out in nature, going for a walk, achieving something, it can only be good, can't it?
yeah, and I think I don't know where many of us would be if we didn't have the natural environment to explore, particularly during the pandemic.
Yeah.
It's been a lifesaver for me. I don't mentally, I don't know where I would be if I was had been unfortunate enough to be one of those who was, stuck indoors for
Yeah.
that period. But many of us have rediscovered the wonderful green spaces on our doorsteps.
Mm.
And unfortunately, many of us, and a higher percentage than many of us would want to admit to, trash those areas.
Yeah.
We'll leave this. And I just cannot get my head around. I cannot understand how somebody can visit these. They're obviously visiting these places because they're beautiful, they're scenic, it's a nice place to be, and yet, they'll have a picnic and then they'll leave all their stuff there.
Mm.
All their plastic bags and wrappers
PPE,
and
Jason.
bottling and oh, don't get me started on
No, don't
PPE.
get me started on PPE
Um,
either.
and they'll and leave it there, and I just
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time trying to step back and trying to get into the minds of these people who do that kind of thing, and I think there must still be some that then they're not aware of they're still, even with everything that we see in the media at the moment, they're still not aware of the potential impact of the consequences of their actions.
Yeah.
And it just kind of reinforces the importance of what many of us are trying to do in keep banging that message out there,
Yeah.
and
Education.
nudging people in the right direction.
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, but I do believe it's thoughtlessness. I mean, people that I speak to, it's not any intention to cause damage or ruin something. It's just thoughtless. But I want to
Yeah.
go on to one of your campaigns though, because one that really touched me, which I think links with this really well, was your litter museum, where you've been
Oh,
posting on the internet about these really old pieces of litter, which I think is absolutely amazing. Some of the things that you found in your litter pick. So can you tell us a little bit about the litter museum and some of your favorite things? And also, are you ever going to open this museum to the public?
well, that's a great question. Well, I've lost count of how many litter picks and beach cleans that I've done, and sometimes when you're on these kind of litter picks, you have to find ways of kind of keeping yourself motivated and keep going. It might be started pouring down with rain and you've got 3 bin bags that you're carrying along, and you're 2 miles away from your car, and you've got to try and find a way of keeping yourself kind of pushing forward. And one of the things I started to do was look at the best before dates on some of the litter that I was finding, and which is a bad thing to do because it becomes quite addictive. And again, that soon became an integral part of what I would do when I was out litter picking or beach cleaning. And sometimes when you're walking along as well, you'll see a piece of litter and it will instantly spark memories from years ago. And because it's something that you recognize from your childhood, and then that, hang on a sec, that's an old piece of litter. A great example of that is the some of the drinks cans that you find. So probably for me, one of the most personal kind of best finds that I found when it comes to drinks cans is a can of Quattro. I don't know if you remember Quattro, but that was from the kind of the mid 80s. So it's
My
got your
goodness.
kind of real kind of 80s design on there, and it was sugary. It was really kind of sweet, but I can remember that was my favorite drink at the time when I met my wife. So seeing that can of Quattro brought back memories of meeting my wife and first starting dating and that kind of thing. And it's amazing how those kind of things trigger memories. Another example is a little wrapper of a little packet of Big D or Double D peanuts, and I can remember. So I found 2 or 3 of those little packets dating from the early 80s. But again, they brought back memories of going to. I used to play in a darts team with my father before he died, when I was quite young, in my early teens. So seeing that instantly brought back memories of going to pubs and playing darts with my dad, because these were the little packets of peanuts where you used to see them on cards behind the bar, and as you pulled the packets off, there would be a photograph on the back that would be totally inappropriate these days. But it brought back memories. But it's also really I find it really useful to really bring home to anyone who's interested and willing to listen to me bang on about it, that this stuff doesn't disappear. No. We might spend a minute using a plastic bottle to drink out of, but that doesn't then just disappear if you throw it into the hedgerow. I think when it comes to plastic bottles, we hear stats about them lasting in the environment for 450 years, and I'm sure a lot of people hear those stats and think, well, how do they know that? Is that true? Do they really last that long? But when you find crisp packets or plastic bottles that are 50 plus years old and they look like they were dropped yesterday, if you can physically show somebody that, it starts to really kind of hit home. And I take a lot of the items that I found into schools, not so much since the lockdown, but when I would do talks and presentations, I would take some of the old litter along and explain the stories behind them, and particularly with the younger children, when you help them to understand and appreciate that that this particular can is older than their mum and dad or their grandparents, it really starts to kind of hit home with them just how long this stuff lasts in the environment. And a lot of people are interested to see those kind of things, and the idea is that I thought long and hard about how can I best share this these vintage litter finds. And so I've got a section on the website where I've got a lot of the images on there. It's only about half of the collection, but then I thought about, wouldn't it be great to have the physical collection somewhere. And I may do that. It's finding the space, and it's finding the appropriate funding to be able to do it. But I'm kind of lean, because I think it'd be fantastic to have the UK's first physical litter museum.
It would.
I think it would be really great. But then I think actually what could be even better is maybe if I can get myself an appropriate van and create a mobile museum, which would then make it much more accessible to a wider audience.
No, I think it's brilliant.
So I think probably leaning towards a mobile litter museum, but I think physical museums could be really interesting. And I think what could be really interesting as well is seeing sections in existing town museums that are dedicated to that kind of thing, because it's I've now got, I think it's just over 300 items within the collection, that are all from the 1900s. So it's
Wow.
between from 1999 back to, I think the earliest piece that I've got at the moment is it's from around 1920, and it's I couldn't believe it when I found it. It was in the centre of Ipswich. As we go through Ipswich, there's a park, Lancia Park, and anyone local listening may well know the park. And many years ago, that used to be a landfill site. That used to be a dump. And I can remember doing a litter pick along Lancia Road, and just as I was coming along the park there was a bank on the side of the road there, and I was picking up some cans and bottles, and I saw this little bit of glass poking out of the ground, and I grabbed it, and it came out, and so it looks like a test tube, sealed at both ends, and inside is a surgical a needle and catgut suture. So the original catgut suture material from around 1920. It's still got the sterile liquid in there. How it lasted 100 years without being smashed, I don't know. But it's got a little label in there as well. Done a bit of research online, found exactly the same item in a museum up in Scotland from 1920. And then there's jars of old Marmite jars from the 20s. There's tins of dentifrice, tooth powder, which when we talk about going plastic free, and we think about bamboo toothbrushes and toothpaste tablets and all of that kind of thing, we used to do that years and years ago. It was all plastic free. So I find these Gibbs toothpaste tins of, as I say, from the 20s and the 30s, and it goes on. So as we go through each of the decades, we see different things, and plastic wasn't really kind of mass produced and used for bottling and that kind of thing until the late 40s, early 50s, round about that time. So the earliest example of plastic that I have in the collection is from a couple of bottles, or one in particular plastic bottle that I found on Bordsey Beach along the Suffolk coast, and it's a small bottle of Revlon aquamarine body lotion deodorant. And again, use the internet. The internet is great for certain things, certainly for doing research. So I've done a bit of research, and I might manage to find images of that exact bottle, which was part of their, I think it was either their 1954 or 1956 range of body lotions. So that's one of the earliest examples of plastic out there, because plastic bottles weren't used much before then. And apart from one little tiny hole in the side, you can still read the print on the outside. You could fill it up with body lotion and still use it.
Amazing.
And it's just incredible. And obviously we get crisp packets and sweet wrappers. Don't really find much fast food packaging, because the explosion of fast food and fast food packaging has only happened, relatively recently. Many years ago, we used to have, there was the odd kind of fast food place. I remember Wimpy was one I remember, but then they were more kind of a restaurant, and you sat in there. There wasn't drive-throughs and certainly all the takeaway coffee shops, chains and that. There wasn't any of that, but even so, I don't think, and we see lots of fast food packaging all over the place, much of it plastic. But I think with a lot of that, as that's left in the environment through the years, a lot of the branding will be lost on it. For example, we can have the McDonald's, Burger King. There's lots of other fast food chains. Substitute a name here, whatever you want to do. But they all have. If you think about their drinks cups that they use, they kind of feel a little bit cardboardy, but you've got a plastic inner in there. And if you've ever done a litter pick and you've picked up any of those when they've been in the environment for a while, what happens is the cardboardy outer kind of disappears, and then you're left with this kind of mushy kind of plastic film, which for many, they probably wouldn't recognize it as a fast food coffee cup. It's just a splodge of plastic film. So with a lot of those kind of items, in another 20, 30, 40 years time, it's going to be hard to identify them as any particular brand. But there's still a lump of plastic in the environment.
Well, we won't be able to be putting them into any kind of museum, will we? Unfortunately. Well, no. I really hope you open that museum to the public, because I think anyone listening would be so fascinated, I'm sure, in all of your different stories. But I just want to quickly move on, because you're so great at telling these stories and sharing these messages, and I know how modest you are. So I'm just going to say you've been very highly recognised for all your work. I mean, a few years ago, I think it was just pre-pandemic, you got the Points of Light Award from the Prime Minister at Downing Street. You've had the Green Hero Award in the Suffolk Creating the Greenest County Awards. And you and I actually met at the first time we ever met was at an award ceremony, wasn't it? It was back in 2016 or something, when we were both getting an award from Theo Paphitis for Small Business Awards. But firstly, the first question is, did you actually get to meet the Prime Minister?
I didn't, to be honest. It was I'm just trying to think of what happened there. It was much that was kind of linked with my work with Keep Britain Tidy as much as anything. I'm a Litter Hero ambassador for Keep Britain Tidy, and it's amazing. It's only 2 or 3 years ago, and I'm just trying to remember what actually happened, but it was around my birthday, actually. And we actually my mind's gone blank now. I'm just trying to remember. Trey's coffee.
Oh yes, yeah.
Actually came along, and there was and to a litter pick I was doing in Woodbridge.
Did she actually do some litter picking?
And there were litter pickers there, but there was not much litter picking was done, to be honest. Yeah, but that was great. But that was and that was a strange time, because that was just before Theresa May was Prime Minister no more. Okay. Let's put it that way. So I have one of the last signatures of Theresa May as Prime Minister. I think probably on the certificate there. But obviously lovely to get recognised for these things. It's lovely, but it's not why you do it, and it's a kind of fun thing to happen. I was very proud to win at the Suffolk the Greenest County Award. Yep. Unfortunately, again, I was on holiday at the time of that, so I missed actually picking the awards up on the award ceremony. But that was a lovely surprise to come home to. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's a bit of paper that sits in a cupboard somewhere, or you might stick it in a frame up on the wall. But it's, in the grand scheme of things, what difference?
Well, I think it change things. It's just about raising awareness. I mean, also it is for us as onlookers, it's great to see businesses, politicians, whatever, taking notice of what you're doing, and maybe the fact that they are taking notice and giving you a pat on the back is a good thing for that. But what do you think they should be doing to tackle the rubbish problem?
Yeah, well, I think it's a, and that's lovely. It's always nice to get a bit of to get that recognition, but actions speak louder than words.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's all very well saying the right thing, but if you don't back it up with action, then you know, then what's the point? A great example of that at the moment is the deposit return scheme. So many years ago, we used to have, you know, bottle return schemes. I can remember cans of, or the bottles of Corona with the 5p or 10p return if you took them back. And we've been there's been consultations going on for a number of years now about reintroducing a deposit return scheme, and how do we do that? Is it an all-in scheme, or do we just have certain items that will be part of it? And the deadline for the consultation keeps being, you know, it's the, you know, we could say it's, the government keeps kicking the can or the plastic bottle down the road, so they don't have to make a decision for one reason or another. And it's just again being delayed, I think, until 2024.
Oh goodness.
And it would just be nice for a change, for, you know, the words to be backed up with action in a timely manner, without having to go through all of the pain of all of the, you know, building these movements and trying to get a critical mass of people and public opinion to, before brands and politicians will make these changes. And I always think of it, you've got when it comes to a lot of these projects and a lot of these big decisions, you've got the 3 P's, which is planet, politics, and profit. And if you think of that as a priority list, when we're thinking about any issue, if we don't have planet at the top of that priority list, then we're not going to be as effective as we could be. So if we prioritize profits or politics over the planet with any of our decisions, then really are we making the right decision long term? And I think, I suppose you could add and then we could think of another P, and I think this was briefly mentioned as well in one of the previous podcasts, and that's power.
Yeah.
And it's recognizing and understanding that we, you know, a lot of these decisions are made linked to power, you know, being in politicians being in power, brands dominating the market that they're in, and many of us as consumers thinking, or as voters thinking, well, you know, what power do we have? Well, we have a lot of power. We have the power to vote for politicians and parties that align with our beliefs and with what we want to see in the world. We have the power to spend our money on products and brands that again align with our beliefs, and we have the power to make changes today, right now, in our, as I said earlier, in our daily lives, to start to make a difference. And we might not, the things that we do might not change the world in general, but it could start to change our world, our little piece of the world in our the little kind of area that we inhabit. And if we start to think about things in a slightly different way, if we start to ask the right questions, if we start to make these little changes, then it will make a difference. it
Yeah.
will, all of these little changes do add up. They do start to change public opinion. They will change brands' opinions. They will change politicians' opinions. But we've got to keep the conversation going. We've got
Yeah.
to keep people nudging people in the right direction, and eventually it will start to change. We will start to make a difference.
Yes, unfortunately, I think we have to be the leaders, don't we? Because currently, in government, the policies seem to be about allowing businesses to mark their own homework on these things, and almost being pushed into making changes, doing any kind of legislation or any kind of reviews. They have to be really heavily pushed into making those kind of changes about environmental things. So we, in a way, us as people on the ground, we have to be the ones who are rocking the boat for people to listen, for people in power to listen, and actually make those legislative changes that are needed to do the right thing for the planet.
Yeah, 100%. And we can't. The worst thing that we can do is for us as individuals is to sit back and expect someone else to
Yeah.
to 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 start that movement, to make those changes. If we think about it, we are someone. We could be that someone to start to start driving that change, to start
to take the leadership.
Yeah. And as I say, the only way we're going to start that movement, we're going to start that conversation, we're going to start that change, is by actually taking action and yeah, and to get off your butt and actually start doing something. Yeah, the problem there is so much waffle. There's so much talk about this kind of stuff, and particularly when we come back to social media. It is social media is a great tool for trying to get this messaging across, but what we've got to remember is that it is a tool. It's not the end game. The end game isn't about getting a viral post, getting as many likes or shares that you can get. It's about the message that's within that post. So for example, I think one of the worrying things is that I think there are a good percentage of people who think they're doing their bit by liking and sharing particular posts, whether it's on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or any other social media platform. But yes, that can help spread that message a little bit further. But again, in the real world, how has that actually changed anything? But if you see a post that resonates with you enough that you want to like and share it, hopefully there's some kind of message in there that will encourage you and inspire you enough in the real world to actually do something.
Yeah.
So whether it's me sharing something about doing a litter pick, or picking up a bit of litter next time you go to the beach, or with the kind of thing that you do, and next time you're trying to make a buying decision about a new item of clothing or something, and actually thinking about, well, actually where was this item made, what will happen, what can happen to it at the end of its use, all of those kind of things. Then we've
got somewhere.
we're getting somewhere. We're having a positive impact.
No, it's true. Well, as you know, this podcast, the Where Does It Come From podcast that you're all listening to, is all about that. It's about exploring the impacts of the stuff that's in our lives on people and planet, all the way through from the making of it. We're interviewing different people, making of products, to buying products, to marketing of products, to disposal of products. And obviously in your case, it's even after that, even after people have disposed of it, what happens to it then? So final question, what changes would you like to see, Jason, in the way that we consume stuff that will solve this issue of rubbish for the future?
I go back to something that I mentioned earlier on in our chat, and that's it's got to come back to education and asking the right questions. If we can help people to be more aware of how they're being manipulated in their purchasing decisions, and getting them to ask the right questions, I think that will have the natural impact on that will be that we'll use less stuff, we'll buy less stuff, and the stuff that we do buy will hopefully have a less of an impact on the natural environment.
Brilliant. No, that's absolutely right. It's got to be education, hasn't it? Because as we've said, if you're educating people, they're going to start pressuring politicians, they're going to start pressuring businesses, and it's like a snowball effect of growing, isn't it? So we start with the thought in people's minds and then let it grow from
That's
there.
And it comes down to nudging them in the right direction and helping them come to their own, making their own decisions and come to their own conclusions. And so the best way we can do that is by providing the right information or let's say providing accurate information in as accessible way as possible, whether that's informative, fun, or however, to help them make decisions and make changes in their lives that will have a positive impact.
No, brilliant. No, I couldn't agree more, to be honest. There's nothing that I can add on that one. Well, I'm very conscious we've been chatting for a really long time, and I found it fascinating. We could obviously keep talking about this forever, and we haven't even talked about face masks, which I know is a thing we share our great love of disposable face masks. So we won't go into that this time, but it's been such a pleasure, Jason, to get you on the Where Does It Come From podcast. So everybody follow Jason Alexander, Rubbish Walks. He's all over Instagram. Well worth following on Instagram for some really entertaining and informative posts and videos. So thank you so much, Jason Alexander, for coming on the Where Does It Come From podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been wonderful, and the time's gone so quick.
I know, it really, really has. Thank you. Let's do it again sometime.
Definitely.